Alright, this is the day that we throw it in the wind. But before we do that, I wanted to go over some more information that I didn't get covered in the initial review video. So, control surface movement. And they have a guide in here for your control linkage connections and also for the amount of control surface movement. So, for low rate on the elevator and the aileron, 8mm up, 8mm down for both. For high rate, it's 10mm up, 10mm down for both the aileron and the elevator. And I have mine set up with a combination of the two, low rate and high rate. I like to have plenty of reserve in my elevator so I don't nose it into the ground on a loop or a split S maneuver or something like that. So the control surface movement I have dialed into the elevator is 10mm up, 10mm down. For the ailerons, I have 8mm up, 8mm down. I was going to program it for 10mm of movement, and I actually moved the control rods on the control horns from the top hole to the bottom hole, because when I received it, they were connected to the bottom hole. So I put it in the outermost hole. So I put it in the innermost hole. There's only two holes on those control horns, and then tested the movement of the ailerons. And even at 100% dual rate, I could not get those to move more than 8mm. So I'm just going to leave them there for now, and because unless you remove the protectors for the servo arms, you can't get to the servo arms to change the linkage there. So if I find that I need more movement on the ailerons, what I'm probably going to do is increase the endpoints for the aileron servo. Some servos will give you more movement. You know, some of them will go up to like 125% instead of 100%. So, and I've done that on a couple of planes, so I will test that if I need more movement in the ailerons after the first few flights, and see if I can adjust it that way. It says that it has 3 9-gram nylon gear servos. It doesn't say whether they're analog or whether they're digital. Usually when they don't tell you they're digital, they're analog. Now these look like analog servos to me, because if I give a full movement on the ailerons and then center the stick, they don't quite perfectly center in coming back up. And if I move the stick the other way to full extent and then center it, they're a little above the perfect neutral in the opposite direction, which is typical of analog servos. That's why I prefer digital servos, because they hit their center positions very well as opposed to analog servos. So I'm pretty sure that these are analog. All right, one other thing they put on this plane that I really, really like, and I think the Viper has it too, it has a handhold for launching this. I wish all manufacturers, especially with the planes that have low wings on them, this makes it so much easier to hand launch with an overhand throw. So kudos to them for doing that. A little more information on the gyro modes, and I'm reading from their vector system here, their vector flight control system. Okay, so here is the indicators for what mode it's in, and it's kind of confusing to me. We'll see if it's confusing to you. Flight mode status, LED, rapid flashes equals stabilized, which means safe mode. And they have the definitions up here. Stability mode. Vector will return the aircraft to level flight when no control inputs are detected, perfect for beginners or as a safe mode in emergency situations. The dynamic mode. This mode allows the pilot to retain complete control of the aircraft. The vector flight control system only makes control inputs when it detects movement not initiated by the pilot, like wind gusts, crosswinds. Direct mode, for expert pilots who want to experience pure flight experience with no electronic intervention, in other words, full manual mode. So, rapid flashes equals stabilized mode, which will be the safe mode. Short flashes, now what's the difference between rapid flashes and short flashes? I'm not sure. Short flashes are to the direct mode, which means full manual mode. And on means dynamic. So You know, I understand which one is dynamic because the LED light is solid. But how do you tell the difference between rapid flashes and short flashes? I don't know. Do you guys know? Anyway, I thought we'd go ahead and crank up the transmitter here. I've got my stick all the way forward, my switch all the way forward, and just so you can see the initialization. So what it will do is when the gyro initializes, it will move the control surfaces 3 times. When that stops, you'll know the gyro is initialized and calibrated. So let's go ahead and plug it in. There we go. So it moved all the control surfaces 3 times. So now it is, okay, so now I got a flashing LED. So is that stability mode or is that manual mode? Let's see. Well, I see the control surface moving. So that's not manual mode. But it's very subtle. So I would say that is probably and that's full forward on the switch. That is probably stability mode. The center position, which is supposed to be full manual mode, and nothing is moving. So that's manual mode. And then switch all the way back. I would say, and it's much more active. So I would say that is probably safe mode. Now, if you'd rather have safe mode all the way forward, which is probably the way I would want to have it, you could always reverse the switch. You know, I set my 3 inputs for the SG switch with each position forward, center, back, and then I set an offset on those channels of -100, 0, +100, and that worked fine. You know, for being able to switch modes on the gyro. So anyway, now that we've got this all figured out, let us go throw caution to the wind and the T33 too. So I'll see how it feels.
Okay, it's time to launch the T33. I think I have it in dynamic mode or stabilization mode where it's supposed to counteract the wind. The gyro is moving all the control surfaces in the proper direction. So let's see if we can get this in the air. We don't have a lot of wind out here today. I already have traffic coming through. See how my landing gear hold up. I've got my timer set for 2.5 minutes. I have got my 3S 1300 milliamp hour 30C LiPo in it. Okay, are we ready to launch? Alright, here we go. Wow, man, that is really... Oh, man. I just stalled it. Oh! That thing was twitchy as all get out. I should have kicked it into manual mode. It just wanted to nose up and then it stalled and then I had no control over it. Okay, so let me see. I'm missing a wheel. There's my wheel. I bent my landing gear, but amazingly my struts are still on. I have broken the wingtip off of it. So I don't know, guys. I don't know what was going on with that, but it was so twitchy. It was nearly uncontrollable, and I had the dual rates or the control surface movement according to the specifications. Let me get over here on the road. And had it in stabilization mode. And I couldn't control it. It wanted to nose up, and then it wanted to stall, and every time I tried to input ailerons, it was so twitchy, I couldn't keep it level. Man, What a heartbreaker. I was looking so forward to getting this T33 in the air. But man, I should have put it, I shouldn't have trusted the gyro right off the bat. I should have put it in manual mode to begin with. But I still don't know if I'd have been able to control it as twitchy as the ailerons were. There doesn't seem to be any major damage to the airframe. Just broken off the wingtip. So I am really, and I had 60% expo. 60% expo in those control surfaces. So I am really going to have to dial that down. And the next time I launch it, I'm going to put it in full manual mode. But what a shame. What a darn shame. What a beautiful looking plane. Well, it was. It's not going to be as beautiful now. It's got plenty of battle scars on it now, but man. And you saw on launch, it didn't have all that much thrust. Of course, I'm flying at 5,700 feet above sea level, and it just had a little 1,300 in it. 3S LiPo, and it wasn't showing a lot of power. So anyway, it is what it is. I'll see you back at the shop.
I don't even want to talk about it. Alright. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that could have gone much better. And you're right, it could have gone much better. Could have gone much worse. Okay, so what did we learn today with this jet? Well, let me see. We learned one thing. We learned that it was very tail heavy. We learned that it didn't have a lot of power. And we learned that the specified control surface movements on this jet were completely wrong. I had 60% expo on the elevator and the ailerons. I had them within the specifications for the amount of control surface movement, and this thing was so out of control. I couldn't even center it up. Every time I would move the stick, it would dump over one way or it would dump over the other way, until I finally stalled it because it was so tail heavy. It just wanted to keep pushing the nose up in the air, and at the same time I'm trying to push the nose down. I'm trying to level it out at the same time, and it just wasn't working. And then when it stalled, I didn't have enough power to recover from it. I had enough altitude, but I didn't have enough power to push out of it, and it just went to a flat spin and came down. And at least it didn't nose in. I guess it could have been worse. It could have nosed into the ground and been completely destroyed. But the way it landed, it was almost completely flat when it landed. I couldn't believe my landing gear were still on there. But, you know, I don't know if it landed on that wingtip, you know, on the fuel pod and snapped it off, or if it landed on a rock on that wing and snapped it off, or a piece of scrub, who knows. There was a lot of scrub over there, so my guess is some scrub snapped it. But anyway, my landing gear held up, you know, except for it ripping one of the wheels off. I mean, the strut's still there on the front. I did find the wheel. I didn't find the keeper for it. But I can fabricate another one of those. But okay, so I've got 4 EDF jets now. Out of the 4, 2 of them have flown fantastic. 2 of them have not. This one is reminding me a lot of my F-86 Sabre jet. And you know how much work and adjustments I had to make to it to get it to fly well. So the question is, am I going to be able to make lemonade out of this lemon before I completely destroy it? So that's the question now. I've also learned one other thing about these EDF jets. And that is that if they are designed for a 3S LiPo, chances are at my altitude, it's going to need a 3S plus power system with a 4S LiPo in it, or a full 4S power. And when I put this one in the air again, when I attempt to put this in the air again, it's going to have a 4S LiPo in it, a 3S plus power system with a 4S LiPo. I didn't have any power at all, which is really odd. I mean, I know this plane is a little bit heavier than the Viper, but the Viper's got sufficient power with that small 3S LiPo. This one's about 25 grams heavier. Well, not even 25 grams heavier now. Because I guess it is with the landing gear. It's probably 25 grams heavier, but it has the same power system. And this just didn't have any power at all, and I don't know if it's because of the airframe. You know, maybe it's got a smaller diameter tube back here or a larger diameter tube. I don't know. But it certainly didn't get the same amount of thrust from the same power system that the Viper was giving me. So, and I even flew the Viper with a battery that was 19 grams heavier than what I originally flew it with, and it carried that very well. I was adding up the weight of the LiPo and the weight of the landing skids on the Viper. I was 32 grams, so I was over 500 grams. So this one wasn't all that much heavier than the Viper. And this had the lightweight battery in it when I launched it. And I still didn't have much thrust at all. So the other mistake I made was I put it in stabilization mode, you know, where it counteracts the wind. I should have just put it in full manual mode. I don't know if I would have been able to save it in full manual mode, but at least I would have taken the gyro question out of the equation. So what are the things that I'm going to have to do to this jet before I attempt to put it back in the air again? Well, I think there are 5 things, and that's a lot. Do you think that's a lot for a factory plane? To have to make 5 adjustments to it just to get it to fly? Maybe. I think it is. So, number 1, I need to put a 4S LiPo in it so it has sufficient power, even if that's just a 3S plus power system. It will have a ton more power than what that 3S is giving me. And at high altitude, I'm going to start off that way from now on. I'm not even going to trust them with a 3S LiPo in them for a sufficient amount of power. So that's number 1. Number 2, the CG is way off. And I'm right in the center of the specified CG. My guess is, if I was a betting man, I'd say I'm probably going to have to move that CG about 10 millimeters forward to where it is now, which means it's going to be 5 millimeters forward of the entire specified range for the CG. And that's not funny, you know, when you're off that much when the documentation is off that much. That's not funny. The other thing I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to tone these. I don't know about the elevator. I didn't even have a chance to test the elevator other than trying to push the nose down with it. But the ailerons are definitely going to have to be toned way down. And I had 60% expo in these control surfaces. And it was that twitchy with 60% expo. So I'm really going to have to dial down the movement on the ailerons. It's hard for me to believe that they were that twitchy. But they were so twitchy it was uncontrollable. Amazing. Alright, so the repair is going to be easy enough. I don't think there's any major damage. The wingtip be glued back on with the wing pod, that's not a problem. Got to put my nose wheel back on it. And I think other than that, other than those 2 things, I think it's going to be ready to launch again. So, and have my fingers crossed, and I'll make sure when I launch it next time it is in full manual mode when I do it. I'll wait until I get everything flying right in full manual mode before I even attempt to test the gyro. But I was just so disappointed, you know, how this reacted when I threw it in the air. I couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. I don't know how the information given to set this thing up could be that far off, but it was. So at least next time I put it up in the air, even if it's trying to stall on me, at least I will have enough power to push through it and get it back down on the ground so I can make adjustments to it. But man, oh man, what a disappointment. I had one success today and one failure, one big failure. So anyway, stay tuned. I will be putting it back in the air. I'm going to try and get the repairs done to it today. I looked at the wind forecast. It looks like it's going to be at least 2 days, maybe 3 days before I have favorable winds again to put it back in the air. So stay tuned and keep your fingers crossed.
Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the air.